Thank you, Scott, for that introduction. The view from up here is pretty spectacular because everyone in the room is here to support the Bay Area Discovery Museum and children's creativity. That's fantastic. So it's such an honor for me to stand here and look at all of you and all that you do to make this possible. And as Scott said as well, to realize that in the room are people who have innovated and created these technologies that we're going to talk about a little bit today. A little bit of context for me. My work is really about the early years, so birth through age 8. That's my focus. I've been at Erickson Institute for 10 years. Erickson is a graduate school in child development. That means I'm a child development specialist, not a technologist, right? So the lens that I look at technology with comes from the lens through child development and what's good for children's early learning. And also, being a senior fellow and advisor at the Fred Rogers Center means that I've spent also 10 years thinking about what would Fred have said to us if he was standing here today about these new devices. We know what he accomplished in television. We know what he did very intentionally with the technology of his day, but how would he feel about it today? So that's part of our charge, and it's a pretty awesome responsibility. So a couple of do you remembers just to get us started. Do you remember when Amazon was a river? Do you remember when Apple was an after-school snack or maybe a pie at Thanksgiving? Do you remember when phones were dumb and hung on the wall in the kitchen and you could hear everything that everyone was saying? So if you're a parent today and you're worried about what's being done on the phone and you can't hear it, maybe this wasn't so bad after all, right? Right in the kitchen, you knew who the friends were, you knew what the plans were. That's amazing. You took tablets for a headache. For me, sleep disruption from screen time was caused by those flying monkeys in The Wizard of Oz. Every year, once a year, the movie came on. Once a year, I could not sleep and crawl back into bed with my parents because the images of those monkeys. So, you know, we actually have been here before, right? We worry about children's, the images that they're seeing today, but, you know, we know something about this. Fortnite was when you had a sleepover for the couch cushion fort that you build with your friend. A little bit different meaning, right? And like meant you had a crush on a girl or a boy in your elementary school classroom. And everybody knew it. Sometimes they knew it before you knew it. And we passed messages back and forth, pre-social media. But, you know, we already had some ideas about that along the way. Your social network depended on how far from home you could ride your bike. And a smart speaker was your parent, a teacher, or a trusted grown-up. We've come a long way. Anybody remember this one? We Are the Jetsons. 1962, predictions of what life would be like that seem so far-fetched and so unlikely, and yet we have all of them today. We can exercise by looking at a screen. We've got watches like this one that can do a lot more than just tell the time. We could do a video chat. We can get our news, whether it's fake or real, from a screen, right? So this notion that we were able to look ahead and see these things, I think, is important for all of us. And then this one's kind of fun as well. One tool to rule them all. These smartphones we carry around are like the Swiss Army knife of technologies. Everything you need is right there in one little package, right? So your phone, your calendar, your maps, your weather, you can see the images that are up on the screen, all live next to each other in one little package. Pretty powerful. And then as Scott said earlier, pretty seductive. Because who among us hasn't done the there it is. There it is. I put it in the other pocket. I couldn't find it. Right? What is it about these things that have such a lure on us as adults? And then what are the implications for kids? We need to avoid the false dichotomy. It's not screens are bad or screens are good. It's not tech or play. It's not tech or nature. It can be digital nature. It can be digital play. It's not tech or time with friends and family, healthy food, and a good night's sleep. It's not children are more isolated than ever or children are more connected than ever. It's not an either or. Either or thinking is not helping us solve these problems, right? There's a little of all of this in what we're doing. Here's a provocation for you. Are young children addicted to screens, or are they in the early years of an engaging and empowering relationship with technology tools for lifelong and life-wide learning, communicating, and connecting? Right? Is it bad? Is it a horrible thing? Could it be a good thing? Maybe it's a little of both, and we need to think that through, but avoid the either or. You know, the screen time debate just won't go away. How much screen time is too much? Dr. Donohue, how many minutes for my 4-year-old? And Dr. Donohue's going to say, I'm not going to answer that question. Because time, while it matters and is an important metric, right? How many minutes your 4-year-old has been looking at a screen does matter. But if that's the only metric, it's not enough. Right? What about the quality of the content, the level of engagement, the opportunity to do something with another child or with you together, right? There are more issues here than just the time. We've got to get past that, and I think screen time actually doesn't serve us very well. We're worried about inappropriate content and commercial messages. Children, again, with these devices are one click away from being in worlds we didn't want them to even know existed, right? So we do have to worry about that. We're worried about negative impact on brain development and social emotional learning. My work has all been on finding the positive ways to support social emotional learning and good early learning using these tools. So again, it's the opposite. We're worried about displacement or replacement. This is a big deal. Early childhood educators, this is one of the ones that really gets them nervous. And the displacement hypothesis is if you invite an iPad into the classroom, something's got to go out, right? It's going to displace something. How about inviting the iPad into the classroom to enhance what's going on or to meet the needs of a particular child in a different way? So that's important. More sleep disruptions, less restorative sleep, less physical activity, more sedentary time, a decrease in outdoor time. The sedentary time and physical activity one, we talk about childhood obesity concerns as well. I'll come back to these. So I wanted to give you the challenge, the yin and yang of this that you're all facing, right? So I've pulled headlines from the last month. These headlines can cause parents confusion and fears and guilt. More screen time for toddlers is tied to poorer development a few years later. That doesn't sound good. Too much screen time can have lasting consequences for young children's brains. That doesn't sound good. These are both related to this study from the Journal of American Medical Association Pediatrics. Association between screen time and children's performance on a developmental screening test. When used in excess, screen time can have consequences for children's development. When used in excess, there can be consequences. I'm not going to argue with that. Researchers found a direct association between screen time and poor performance on developmental screening tests. That sounds pretty frightening, doesn't it? But it's correlation, not causation. It doesn't mean that excessive screen time causes poorer development, right? There's a relationship there. It can be a contributing factor. We have to be careful of the headlines. Limiting screen time could be a powerful protective factor for a wide range of children's health and wellness indicators. And then, because we always have to kind of hedge our bets a little bit, it's too soon to say that limiting screen time alone will improve developmental outcomes for children in any meaningful way. So we've really gotten ourselves wound up about this, and then in the end we go, well, you know, really, we don't know yet how this is going. Not knowing how it's going is not comforting to parents who have 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds. I get that, okay? So then here's the opposite. Headlines that may decrease parent confusion, fears, and guilt. Studies shoot down tech's harmful effects on kids, so now what? The kids who use tech seem to be all right. Screens might be as bad for mental health as potatoes. Hold on to that thought. These are all related to a study out of the UK, the association between adolescent well-being and digital technology use. These researchers, using methodology that looked at massive sizes of data sets, found that the correlation between technology use and well-being is negative. Okay, so like the first study, it doesn't look like it's a good thing, right? But it's very, very small. It explains at most 0.4% of the variation. Effects dependent on the user. Of course they do. We all have children. Each child is different. Some children experience benefits and risks, but others, and risks are increased for others. Getting enough sleep and regularly eating breakfast are more strongly associated with well-being. Getting enough sleep and eating breakfast. Well, that sounds like back in my day, right? You got to get enough sleep. You got to eat a good breakfast to start your day. Eating potatoes is associated with nearly the same degree of effect as technology, as screen time, right? So, okay, let's have just a little bit of fun with that. If all you eat is potatoes, that's not good. If you don't include potatoes at all in your diet, that might not be good. If because you like potatoes, you stop eating other vegetables or foods that would be good for you, that's not good, right? So this is funny in a way, but also a good reminder to us. The level of association documented in this study is incongruent with the level of panic we see around things like screen time. So where do we get to, right? Screens are good, screens are bad. No, screens can be good, screens can be bad, right? It's more nuanced than that. It's not just one or the other. That's important. So a couple of research questions, and Scott and I will talk about this in a bit. How does 40 years of television research inform young children's use of digital devices, tangible technology, and other tools? We know a lot about screens and kids. We know a lot about Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers and other programs and how screens impact kids. But we don't know about these screens as much, right? And that's what we have to learn. What are the evidence-based and developmentally informed benefits and risks to young children's well-being from screen use? So let's answer the questions we just got confused by, right? What's good? What's bad? Under what conditions does screen use result in a positive outcome? Under what conditions, a negative outcome? We just simply don't know. This is the great experiment. We're experimenting on our very young children. What does digital well-being mean for children and families? I'll come back to that idea. Children are growing up in this always-on digital culture. There's no putting the genie back in the bottle. Nobody's going to uninvent the iPad, right? They're here. They're already in our world. That's what's driven my work. Children already have them in their hands, so what are we going to do to help children make the best of that? Okay, you've got this. If you're a parent of a young kid, you can go home tonight and say, I've got evidence-based solutions to some of these questions, right? Based on research. Sleep disruptions, absolutely. Turns out that the closer to bedtime a child has a screen experience, the more likely they are to have difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, nightmares, night terrors. Right? You with me on that? Okay, so here's your solution. Turn it off earlier in the evening. No screen times right up to bedtime. No screens in bedrooms. That used to be, the American Academy of Pediatrics said, take televisions out of bedrooms. That was one challenge, but now we got all these other kinds of screens, so it's another. Language learning. We learned that children learn language from people, not from screens. In fact, screens are really lousy at helping children learn language because this is how we learn language. We interact with people, right? So let's do a lot of that and a little of the other. Let's actually add language to the use of technology. Social and emotional learning. Look for interactive media that invites interactions with others. Interactive media, interactions with others. Joint engagement. Turns out that using media together enhances learning. We know this from the early literacy research, right? When you read a book with a child, the child learns more and has a different experience, qualitatively different experience, than when you just hand the child the book. Same thing with these devices. Sedentary behavior. Okay, we're worried about kids not moving enough. Let's use the technology to get them up and moving. Let's get them outside. Displacement. We got to avoid that either or. We need to focus on technology that enhances. And then well-being, this strive for balance in defining a healthy media ecology. I just want to say quickly about the word balance, because you hear that all the time. All you parents are like, you need more balance. It's not 50-50. That's not balance. It's not 50% of the time on technology and 50% everything else. right? It's what's the percentage of technology use in the 100% of the child's life that keeps them in balance, right? So a different equation, and that's powerful. Reimagine screens is beneficial. What happens if we stop thinking screens are horrible and start thinking screens can be good? Well, it changes the perception. We want active, interactive, inclusive. You can see the words on the screen. Enhancement, not displacement. Meaning-making, not meaningless time. Creation, not consumption. We want tools for learning, not teaching. Not all screens are created equal, and you're all dealing with this, that we've got all kinds of new devices, and some things don't have screens at all, like the virtual assistants, right? There's no screen there. What does that mean? Okay, here's one I want you to just ponder a little. 21st century children need any century dispositions. These lists we come up with about 21st century skills, we've had these lists forever. This is what we've wanted for children for a long time. What's different is 21st century tools, not the list, right? So playing well with others, being curious and creative, being imaginative, pretending, playing, exploring, experimenting. These are the things that the Bay Area Discovery Museum is all about, right? This list is the sweet spot for the museum. So these are things that we do want to support in children, but we've always wanted to. Here's one other nudge about that. We often say children are the future, but your children are right here now. They're right in front of you now, today, right? If all we worry about is learning how to code at 4 so you can be a programmer at 21, we're missing the whole point, right? There's all sorts of reasons why getting involved in coding at 4 is an interesting thing to do, right? But not because it leads to an occupational opportunity, right? Live in the present, give children wonderful todays. If they have enough wonderful todays, the future tends to take care of itself. I love this quote from Seymour Papert from MIT. The most important skill determining a person's life pattern has already become the ability to learn new skills. The most important skill is the ability to learn new skills, to take in new concepts, to assess new situations, to deal with the unexpected. This will be increasingly true in the future. The competitive ability is the ability to learn. The ability to learn. That's powerful. And Papert wrote that in 1994, right? And it's so relevant today. This is right. Early year essentials matter. Just ask yourself, what are the experiences you believe young children need to have, absolutely need to have in the early years to grow up well, to be happy and engaged? Then those are non-negotiable, right? You can see my list. This is Chip's list on the screen. These are non-negotiable. These are must-haves. These are things that kids need to experience. So technology either enhances them or we put it away. Technology either enhances them or it doesn't come out to begin with, right? Technology has to be a tool to support these things that we consider essential. Creating media and storytelling matter. Again, this is a big part of the work of the museum. I think this is one of the more exciting parts of the work that I've been doing as well. What we're realizing is these tools allow children to be media creators, not just media consumers. That's a big idea, folks. You're 3 and you're creating media. That's pretty good. That's powerful. If you look at the images on the screen, they all have digital cameras. So it's as simple as take a picture, tell a story, email it to my parent or grandparent or whoever. I'm a media creator. I love this quote from Maya Angelou. You can't use up creativity. The more you use, the more you have. Sounds like a mantra for the museum as well. This is from a colleague in Boston who we call the mediatrician. Our focus should be on living well with media rather than opposing or restricting it. Living well with media rather than opposing or restricting it. So the question in the air is, what does it mean to live well with media in your life, in your home, with your family, with you personally and professional? Because that's going to be a different answer for all of us, which is okay. Remember, it's no one size fits all. And then this little bit of a nudge, you know, this idea of putting your mask on first and then protecting if you're in the airplane and then helping the child next to you. I think we need to put our masks on first As adults, we need to pay attention to our own media behaviors, what we're doing, what we do in front of kids, how well we do it, whether having my phone out means I'm distracted and disrupted. All of these things are important. This notion of parenting without presence, if that one doesn't strike you in the heart, parenting without presence, physically there, unavailable. We have the risk is there because we have these devices that are very compelling, as Scott mentioned, so we have to watch out for that. One quick line here, the one at the bottom is from China, from a public service announcement in China aimed at parents of young children because they were concerned that parents were spending too much time looking at technology and not enough time engaging with the kids. The more you connect, the less you connect. Pretty good. The more you connect, the less you connect. You know why it's really good? Why it rises above pretty good? It works in both directions. The more you connect with your technology, the less you connect with your child. The more time you spend connecting with your child, the less time you have to connect with your technology. That's pretty good. Take that one home with you and ponder that a little bit. Here's a quote from Fred Rogers that I just love. Let's not get so fascinated by what the technology can do that we forget what it can't do. It's through relationships that we grow best and learn best. And if that doesn't sound like Mr. Rogers to you, right? It's all about relationships. It's not about technology. It's about relationships, and then technology in the service of those relationships. Okay, so as the clock ticks down, 10 takeaways for becoming screen wise. We need to move from being screen worried to becoming screen wise. And that doesn't mean that we stop worrying, right? The whole point of inviting those concerns into the conversation was because we have to pay attention to the things that we're worried about. And Scott and I are going to talk about a bunch more of them, right? We cannot ignore those. But I would argue that in addition to acknowledging them, we need to look for solutions. So trust your instincts and know what you know. If it's been enough, if enough is enough screen time, you know what? You're right. It is enough. You don't need me to tell you. Dr. Donohue doesn't have to say 15 minutes. You can say, at 12 minutes, there's nothing of value going on here. Enough is enough. Trust your instincts. The challenge with trust your instincts, too, though, is that you can't ask your parents for advice on this stuff. They didn't live through this. We can go to our parents and our grandparents for lots of child-rearing advice, but not about these digital devices. This is new. We're kind of on our own. Here's another one that's really powerful, in case you forget sometimes. These things have on and off switches. Look, you push it and it turns off. And the best news is you're in charge of the on and off, not the 4-year-old. Although the 4-year-old would love you to believe that they are in charge of the off and on, right? And they're going to fight you for that. But remember, when they fuss about turning it off, they're doing their job. They're 4, and they're supposed to fuss when something happens that they don't like. That's the way it works. You're the adult. You're supposed to listen calmly to their fussing and still turn it off, right? And so that's important. We need to balance obvious benefits with potential harms. There are things that are good about these devices. There are things we're concerned about. We do need to set limits. That's right. Dr. Donohue just said set limits. Just remember that time is only one part of that limit making, right? And plan for unplugged time. Here's the great bit of parenting advice. And of course, you'll go home, try it, and it won't work, right? What are we going to do when we turn it off? Foreshadowing that time on the screen and the game you're playing is going to come to an end. And what would you like to do when we stop doing that? I think that's really an important one. Consider the 3 C's: content, context, and child. Content, context, child. What's the content that the child's interacting with? What's the context? Who are they with? Where are they at? What are they doing? And then what's your individual child's interest all about? Okay. We need to give children tech tools for learning, documenting, demonstrating, communicating, connecting, and sharing. And you have the experts on this conversation in this room from the Bay Area Discovery Museum. They're helping the whole field figure out how to do this, what those tools are and how they look like. But these are all tools of empowerment, right? Help children progress from consuming media to creating it. Define living well with media for your family. Figure out what that means in your home. Pay attention to your own technology use in front of kids when the kids are around. Be a digital tour guide, be a media mentor. Remember, it's never either or, and it's always, it depends, right? There's no one answer. Turns out that human development, child development, families, communities, all of these things are so complicated. There is never one answer. The answer actually is always, it depends, right? And it depends on your own child and your own way of thinking about it. Go back to a piece more about being outdoors, but seems so appropriate to me. A child's world is fresh and new and beautiful, full of wonder and excitement. If a child is to keep alive his inborn sense of wonder without any such gift from the fairies, he needs the companionship of at least one adult who can share it, rediscovering with him the joy, excitement, and mystery of the world we live in. Be that one adult. Be that companion. Be that co-explorer with your child. Help them understand the world that they're in. And that includes tech and non-tech. Here's a great one from Anya. Enjoy screens, not too much, mostly with others. There's the whole presentation right there, right? That's as good as the more you connect, the less you connect, right? Enjoy screens. Sure, use your screens. Enjoy them. Let kids enjoy them, but not too much. And mostly use them to engage with others, right? I think that's wonderful. And then a final one from Fred Rogers. My hunch is that if we allow ourselves to give who we really are to the children in our care, we will in some way inspire cartwheels in their hearts. So your challenge from up here, one is I've now told you you're all media mentors, go forth and mentor around media, but make sure it's cartwheel worthy, right? That the ways in which you're interacting kids, that's such a wonderful image from Fred about cartwheels in hearts. And what can we do? And you know, maybe that includes technology, and maybe it doesn't. If the technology enhances the quality of the cartwheel, then let's use it. If it gets in the way of the cartwheel, then let's not. And I think that's really important. So I'm going to stop there, and Scott and I are going to have a little chat about some of these issues. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And I love the Fred Rogers reference and that you come from the Fred Rogers Institute. It's got me thinking I'm imagining an episode of the Mr. Rogers Show where he's there in the neighborhood with an iPad. Yep. What do you think Fred Rogers would say examining these new tools?
That's a great question. There's a quote from Fred about showing children that he could use a computer. So he had a computer in the neighborhood, but then showing them that he could turn it off. We're back to that turn it off, right? That it takes a strong person to turn it off. Now that's a long time ago, and it feels very relevant to me. I think Fred would say the same thing. Are these tools for relationship building and interactions, or are they tools that get in the way? Are they tools that help a child feel more empowered as a learner, or not? Are they tools that help a parent and a child feel more connected? Then I think he would have said yes. I think that he would be horrified at this notion of parenting without presence. I think that would just be the opposite of anything Fred Rogers ever believed in. That the adult is there but not available is just not okay, right? So focusing on that relationship.
And what do you see as the best example of technology done well with children? Like, do you have a particular vivid example of where you say this could not have been done otherwise?
Yep, I do. And this is what I'm most excited about. So this device happens to be an iPad, this tablet, right, has affordances that lend itself to storytelling so powerfully, right? The child can take a picture. The child can take a movie of something that they're doing. You can interview the child in audio about what they built or what they did along the way. we can turn that into a story that we send to grandma halfway across the country, and then we do a video chat on the same device to talk about our story. Or we send it home, and the parents have something to really talk about that's tangible about what happened today at school. So this, to me, in my work, this is the sweet spot. This is what I'm most excited about, because it's everything that I care about, right? It's child as a learner, child as empowered, child in control of the technology, child's driving it, not anybody else, child as communicator. These are the kind of things that I think lend themselves nice to that, being future ready by doing really cool things today that show me that I can be a storyteller.
And let me take the flip side as well,
Yeah,
because there's a lot of people who are into abstaining. You say it's not either or. A lot of people strongly believe that there should be no screens. We have the wait until 8th movement, where parents take a pledge to have no screen until the 8th grade. Right. And to represent that perspective, let me just quote a recent article in the Atlantic that's summarizing clinical studies. All screen activities are linked to less happiness, and all non-screen activities are linked to more happiness. If we were going to give advice for a happy adolescence based on the survey, it would be straightforward. Put down the phone, turn off the laptop, and do something, anything that does not involve a screen. How would you respond to that perspective?
I think that's a little intense. A little unrealistic. What I'm wanting to do is empower and equip kids to put it down when it's the right thing to do, to use it when it's the right thing to do. I have trouble with the everything on a screen is bad and everything off a screen is great. That doesn't work for me. I think that both can have good and bad sides to them, so we need to think differently about that. The question what you started with was this notion of no screens and parents making decisions for no screens. Okay, so here you go, folks. Quote me on this one. If you don't think your kids should have screens, then they shouldn't have screens, because you trust your instincts. If you think they should have screens, then you work with these ideas that I've shared today to make sure that's really positive. It's okay. And what's behind that, Scott, and I think we've talked about too, is this fear that if I don't have my 3-year-old using an iPad, they won't be ready for school. They won't be successful as learners, right? They have to have this to get there. I don't buy it. We don't have any evidence of that. We have evidence that when they're used well in the right context, that kids can learn and can engage. But we also have evidence that says that the opposite can happen, as you've just described. So, I'm going to go back to trust your instincts. But every year, the articles come out again about parents in Silicon Valley who are technology parents and who choose to not have screens. And my answer is always, good for them. They're the parent. They've made a choice. Is that right?
Yeah, the most famous example of that would be Steve Jobs,
Sure.
who invented these things
Right.
and prohibited his children from ever using them.
Right.
Is that not an insight that we might heed?
I can't get inside of Steve's head. I find it a tad ironic that I can be the builder of these things but won't let my own kids, right? That's where's the do no harm in that moment, right? I create products that are really horrible for people to use, make a lot of money. I'm going to make sure I protect my own kids. I think that's a challenge. The Today version, Steve's been gone a while. The Today version is persuasive design and advertising to young kids and in-app purchases and other manipulative ways of getting kids to make decisions while using a screen that just seems unethical to me. But you can see from my beard color, I've been around a while. I grew up in the Saturday morning cartoons where every advertisement was a sugary cereal that was not good for me and was advertised to me, not to my parent, even though the parent was going to do the buying, right? Why? Because when we went to the grocery store, I was going to have a fit about getting the Sugar Smacks. And sometimes that would mean my parent would say, oh, I can't take this anymore and get it, right? So I think there's a digital age version of candy bars at the checkout lane in the grocery store that's just not okay. It's not okay. We can do better than that.
You said spend less time monitoring and more time mentoring, and I very much understand the wisdom of that. The part I'm worried about is that I'm not sure I trust myself as a mentor. I look at my, the iPhone sends you your screen time report, and I can't believe I've spent 3.5 hours a day staring at this thing, and I take this seriously. I take mindfulness courses, right? So, how's the average parent supposed to be a mentor when we can't even control ourselves?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I said as I was finishing that I've anointed you all as mentors, right? Like it or not. We all come to this with a different level of understanding. All I'm asking you is that wherever you are today, as we're talking today, is the starting point, not the end point, and you're thinking about technology and kids, right? That you're going to push yourself to learn more. You're going to talk to other parents about how they're handling it. You're going to pay attention to your own child's behavior. And really, we're going to pay attention to our behavior. Because if we want to change the way kids use media, we better take a look at ourselves first, right? And if what we're modeling, because it turns out that the most powerful role model for media use is the parent of the child, right? No surprise. Then, can we get to a do as I say and as I do? Or are we stuck with a do as I say, but, forget it? If the family has made a decision as part of their living well with media that there's no screens at the dinner table, but dad gets to bring his, because there's a game on and I got to check the scores or right? Whatever. I'll be the dad in that case, right? If I get to break the rules, what am I saying to my kids about this decision we all made, right? To be well and to talk to each other without these devices. So, I think you're right. There's a lot of responsibility on us here, but we've been down this road before. I think one of the things that I worry about is that somehow we're privileging these things like they're this new thing we have no basis for understanding, and I don't agree. I think as we know something about parenting, we know something about child development, we know something about early learning. So take charge. I want the kids to take charge, and I want you to do your best and take charge. And are you going to get it right every time? Not a chance. Not a chance, right? It's an inexact science. Raising kids is really hard work. Raising 3-year-olds is really hard work. And you're going to get it right sometimes, and you're not going to be right some other times. Just, be mindful. You used the word. It's a great word. Be mindful of when this is getting in the way. Be mindful of when this could be helpful. I'm going to turn sideways. We talk about you're driving home in San Francisco up these unbelievable hills, and the traffic is all crazy, right? And your kid's in the back fussing, right? So what do? We do the iPhone pass back, right? That is not inherently an evil moment. Because we've been passing stuff back as long as there's been a conveyance and a kid behind us, right, since the dawn of time. But it could be so much better, right? So here's the tip. You hand it back. What game you're still driving. What game are you playing? Describe to me what's happening on the screen. What's going on? And then, of course, the $1 million one, right? What are we going to do when we get home and we turn it off? Because when we get home, you're going to give me back my phone and it's going off, right? So that notion of I think, being planful is good.
I do want to push back one
push
more
away.
time.
Push away.
On the we've been down this road before thing, because this time might be different. And I was a tech entrepreneur as well, and I passed out that Kool-Aid for a living.
Sure.
The whistleblowers over the past couple years coming out of Facebook, coming out of Google, saying that the top behavioral scientists of the world have been busy studying the brain and signaling and dopamine and coming up with an experience and concoction that just might mesmerize us beyond our free will. TV was seductive, sweets are seductive. Could it be that this time we're dealing with something that is truly more powerful than us.
Yeah. I think that's a fair concern, right? That the persuasive design, the notion of addiction by intent, right? That I'm going to hook you in and keep you there. I won't go down other paths about products that have had similar strategies over time, right? And been successful. I think this is where, as consumers and as parents and as grandparents and as people in the world that young children are in, we do need to be really vigilant about that, and we need to understand it. And if I can't turn this off, and you started earlier by saying you can't not look down when the text comes in. If I, as the parent, can't not look down, they got me already, right? So of course they're going to get the kids too, right? So we do have a task to do. I think we need to ask some hard questions about programming in this notion of persuasion and manipulation for young kids. It's just not okay.
The young kids part seems pivotal, because when I listened to your presentation with my 4-year-old and 5-year-old in mind, it seems spot on, and I can just see that working together with technology, having that co-presence, benefiting from the tools. But then something seems to happen with my nephews who are 10 and their peers. Is there maybe a divide between, your area of focus is 0 and 8.
Right.
Is there maybe something after that we haven't fully understood yet? You mentioned that we should encourage more research. Is that an area you'd focus on?
Yeah, this is a great question. So my work in birth through 8, right? My goal, my hope, is to equip kids with some skills and knowledge and abilities to manage this stuff. Start out with it being friendly and learn to manage it. But the world changes. The world changes for these kids. The world they're in changes. The way in which their peers are using media changes. The way they feel excluded or included changes. This is the part of the experiment we don't understand, and it's very important that you stay concerned about that, right? Your kids are going to move up that ladder, and you're feeling cozy now, but what happens, right? So I do think we have to be very vigilant around how this is working. I keep coming back to, I don't often have to look past my own behavior to get a good feel for why are we struggling, right? And I know all about this, and I just stood in front of the group and talked about it, and yet I can fall victim to I just got a text message. I wonder who that's from, right? So there's the look down at it, secretly. And then there's the look down at it secretly and then have to respond, right? That's where it breaks, right? That's where the relationship ends. That's where probably most of you have lost the face-off between the conversation and the digital device at some point, where the person you were talking to gets a text and they're gone, right? There was a study done a number of years ago out of Harvard, and the researcher was talking to adolescents around parent media use, and the most dreaded words on the behalf of the adolescents that a parent could say is, just let me check my email. Now, why would that be, right? Because what does it really translate into? I've lost you. We were going to the park. We were going outside. We were going to play a game. We were doing something, and you're gone. So this notion that that's code for I'm out is worrisome.
You've spoken a lot about that we all have to be mentors. I want to ask you about lower income kids and families. We used to spend a lot of time thinking about the digital divide, worrying that low income kids would be left off of the digital future. And something of the opposite has happened, where with their parents being busy with multiple jobs, they've actually had less mentoring and have gone deeper down into the digital hole. What kind of recommendations would you have for low-income families to navigate this?
Yeah. If it turns out that using these tools has some learning advantages for a child, then it has to have the advantages for every child. You with me? Not for some. It's got to be for all. In my part of the field, we're really struggling with equity issues around access. Yes, the digital divide, if you look at the numbers, more families have a digital device, but there's a difference between this is the digital connecting point and it's dad's, and that's the only one in the house, versus everybody's got iPads and phones and other things. So we really have to be concerned about this sense of equity and whether kids are starting out behind somehow because they don't have the same access points.
You said screens are a tool for learning, not a tool for teaching. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, thanks for asking that one. I love this one. So I want the device to be something the child uses to learn with, right? To tell their story, to explore their world, to document their learning, to demonstrate what they know, to show you what they know. That's very different than the device teaches the child. I want parents and teachers to teach children and the devices to support their learning. And I know that seems nuanced. On my side of the world, it's not nuanced at all. I'm very worried about kind of programmed instruction and personalized learning, which sound great, and which we have through AI the capability of doing some amazing things. But I don't want the computer to decide, make those decisions. I want the adult and the child to make those decisions. So, and again, that notion of, they're here today and the future will be there. Kids who grow up empowered to know they control the technology, they're in charge, they're the ones that make the choices, I think feel, have a tool that will continue to serve them well as they get older. Yeah, interesting.
I recently heard a 13-year-old talking about internet memes. These are ideas that are passed through images and videos through social networks. And he said, memes are a higher form of language. And it got me first thinking I was missing out. But it got me thinking, I'd like to ask you, do you think that children might use these tools to invent whole new forms of communication that they're beyond what we can currently comprehend?
Yeah, that's a great question. I hope so. And I mean that sincerely, that as these tools evolve, how we use them and what we can do with them will change. What I'm really wanting is that children see these as tools for connection, not disconnection, for positive experiences with friends, not bullying online and that kind of thing. Yeah, I think the potential is there. Let's talk about smart speakers. Right? Many of you may have one in your kitchen or wherever. We don't know anything about the impact of that technology on kids. It wasn't designed for kids. It was designed for adults, but it lives in their world. So was this, so was this. This was not designed for kids. The smartphone was not designed for kids. What's the implications of that? Of designs that were never intended for kids being plopped right in the middle of the world? Well, the linguistic folks in my end of the world are fascinated by smart speakers because is this good news or bad news, right? If the child can't get the speaker to understand them, maybe they show a lot of resilience and persistence and they keep trying until they get it, right? Maybe they get frustrated and stop communicating, right? Maybe they think, I can't do it. There's that great video on YouTube of the little girl trying to talk to Siri, and she cannot get Siri to understand. The beautiful part about that one, if you've never seen it, is she's so empathetic. Oh, she doesn't understand me. I'm trying so hard to help her, right? So if in fact these could be tools of empathy and connectedness, then I think we've got something. They will always also be tools of the opposite, and we have to watch for that.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Scott.
I hope my children will be as empathetic as well. Thank you.
Great.